Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. Former IBF champion Ebanie Bridges reveals pregnancy to the world with beaming boxer showing off baby bump as she arrives at a Misfits event. This was yesterday. She was there to support her old buddy, El Brock.
Guess that rules her out of Lou DiBella's 8-woman tournament.
Boxer Ebanie Bridges has revealed to the world she's expecting her first child. The blonde bomber hasn't set foot inside the ring since her decision loss to Miyo Yoshida last December, which saw her lose the IBF female bantamweight title. The 37-year-old made an appearance at the latest Misfits boxing event and was sporting a baby bump.
At 37 years old, her biological clock is ticking. She may have decided to use this hiatus as the opportunity she's been looking for to make an addition to her family.
A tough decision. There was a blurb about Matchroom offering something or other, some amount of money for some fight that she wasn't on board with, so she hadn't fought the entirety of this year. So when the promoters aren't offering you the kind of money you're looking for, you're not just going to come back for any amount, not peanuts on the dollar. She had a lot of time on her hands. I'm not surprised, because I vaguely recall Ebanie Bridges saying that she eventually would have to take time out if she wanted to have a kid, that she was running out of time. At 37 years old,
Going on 38.
Ebanie's kept a relatively low profile since the crush and defeat, keeping public appearances to somewhat of a minimum, but she made the trip to Newcastle on Saturday to watch her pal El Brock headline Misfits Boxing 18 X Series event, and she proudly showed off a baby bump upon arrival at the Utilita Arena, much to the surprise of some of her acquaintances. YouTube channel Boxing King Media revealed Bridges' pregnancy to the world, briefly catching up with her before she entered the arena for the fights. Motherhood is something Bridges has longed for but put off in order to pursue her dream of becoming a world champion, which she's done. In an exclusive interview with Sun Sport 2 years ago, she said, "It's a battle I have all the time, and it's very heartbreaking. I want nothing more than to have a family and have kids. It's very important to me. It's getting harder, and it's a tough decision to make. I think the recent hiatus nudged her in that direction, that if Matchroom's not offering you the kind of money that's worth your while,
It's not worth your time.
you can use that as an opportunity to do this, what you've been waiting to do. Though what that effectively means is that Ebanie Bridges is done at world level.
Safe to say we're not going to see her in a boxing ring this year, and we're not going to see her in a boxing ring for most of next year.
I am at the peak of my career, and to stop and have a kid, not only does that put me out for a year, but it makes it very hard to have a kid with my partner back home. My career is over here, and it's not in Australia. I can't have a baby, then disappear and ask someone else to look after the baby and head to the UK for weeks at a time while I'm in training camp. It's not possible. It's hard for me. It's hard for my partner. But I have to go with my heart and believe that everything happens for a reason. And perhaps it did.
I don't blame her, to be honest.
I'm just praying in a couple of years I've achieved what I want to achieve and can go off and then have children. Bridges had a front row seat for El Brock's unanimous decision victory over Jenny Savage, which saw her retain the Misfit women's middleweight title.
So if this is the end of Ebanie Bridges' time at world level,
Now a former world champion, if she's done fighting for alphabet titles and just all that kind of stuff at this point, because she's 37 now, by the time she comes back, she could be 38.
2 years removed from the sport, she last saw action in December of last year. She won't see action in December of this one.
And it could be December of next year before she returns. It could end up happening that way. That amount of time could pass, which would herald the end of Ebanie Bridges' boxing career at world level.
She's an overachiever. That's how you have to look at her. Because most women that pick up a pair of boxing gloves and decide to box at the age that Ebanie did, they're not going to make it to a world title. She did.
Most women, most men, at the age that Ebanie decided to start boxing, they're not going to make it as far as she did. So if this is the end and we are to reflect on what has been her boxing career, all in all, she did all right. Better than most people would in that same situation. She did do what she set out to do. She became a world champion.
She even got the punch up on one of her critics, one of her biggest naysayers, her countrywoman, Shannon O'Connell. She knocked her out.
So, I think it's been successful. I think it's been a successful boxing career, though given when she started boxing, that didn't give her that much time to see all of her goals accomplished simultaneously. This is a necessary sacrifice. There's a life after boxing.
The bantamweight division will have to do without Ebanie Bridges, but it's deep enough. There's enough there that another star could rise. I talk about that division all the time.
Unified champion Dina Dorsland, she said something similar, that after her next fight, if she doesn't land a big one like another unification match for good money, she's going to go off and have a kid. That's what she's going to do.
She's a couple of years younger than Ebanie. More accomplished, too. She's a 2-division champion, unified at 118.
Similar mindset, ready to make the same sacrifice that Ebanie is making. And it just is what it is.
Congratulations to Ebanie. It's been a fun run.
So our attention now turns to the men's middleweight division, where this past weekend, Erislandy Lara successfully defended his WBA title to remain WBA champion in a division that's not getting a lot of attention, doesn't have a whole lot of money flowing through it. What is Lara going to do now? He's on the same side of the street as Carlos Adames, this division's WBC champion, but a fight between them, in spite of it being a unification match, it's actually not a hot ticket. It's not a big fight. It's a meaningful fight to the division, though it's not worth a lot of money, and because it's not, you have to question whether or not the PBC will even decide to make it.
This is the first time in a long time that Lara's fought more than once in the same calendar year. He's been fighting once a year for the last 3 or 4 years or so, as of 2020.
The last time that Lara had fought 2 times in the same calendar year was way back there in 2019, and he's been boxing once a year ever since, up until this year. So he's productive. He's being productive.
That's good.
Though to what end? You're not going to make buku dollars unifying titles with Carlos Adames. I don't get the sense that Lara wants to cross the street for the winner of Mikhailiovic versus Janibek.
I don't know.
Depending on who wins that fight. And what are Lara's chances against those fighters at 41 years old? I want to say that Janibek Alimkhanalai, if he stays unified middleweight champion, he's a guy who Top Rank signed in the hopes that they could do with him what HBO did with Gennady Golovkin, but Janibek is no Gennady Golovkin.
Now, you could probably give Janibek the edge to beat a 41-year-old Erislandy Lara. You probably could. But Janibek is the same guy that looked pretty average against Denzel Bentley.
Safe to say Erislandy Lara comes from a better school of boxing than a Denzel Bentley. So if a Denzel Bentley can make you look human, can an Erislandy Lara beat you? Lara's got power. He can punch.
It's intriguing.
If Janibek beats Andrei Mikhailiovic and stays unified middleweight champion, a fight between him and Lara, there's enough there that it is intriguing. And it's not exactly a foregone conclusion that Janibek wins. Not really.
It's a good fight.
Lara versus Adames. Not as good a fight stylistically, aesthetically, not intriguing. It's going to look like when Adames fought Cachet or when Lara fought Cachet. You're going to have 2 finesse fighters in there, 2 chess players. Doesn't make for a fun fight to watch. And what are the fighters going to want to get in the ring with each other to begin with?
Rumor has it that former undisputed junior middleweight champion Jermell Charlo is set to return to action on the undercard of Gervonta Davis's fight sometime in either late November or December. And it's conceivable that when he comes back, he's not coming back as a junior middleweight. He hasn't made that weight in something like 2 years. If and when he comes back, he might come back as a middleweight. So are the PBC pulling strings behind the scenes to put Jermell in the ring with Lara? or Jermel in the ring with Carlos?
One of them. You have to consider that he's coming back, and he's coming back for something. The middleweight division is not the glamour weight today that it used to be in previous eras. There are a good number of interesting fights to make, but how many of them are actually getting made?
Errol Spence?
This past weekend, Errol Spence Jr. made some mention via his Instagram stories that he might come back at either 154 or 160. Did he do so under the impression that if Danny Garcia wins, he would fight him in a rematch for what would have been Danny's WBA title? Danny lost. Danny quit in his corner. Lara kept the belt. Now that he has it, he still has it. Will Errol fight him?
Not unless he wants to end up like Danny.
It's a big part of the reason I approached the Lara versus Garcia fight with a lot of skepticism, that Errol hinting at a move to middleweight might be centered around Danny winning the fight. But why would anyone who knows anything about boxing think that Danny was going to win that fight?
It's a good question.
No, I don't think Errol Spence Jr. keeps the energy for Lara that he might have been keeping for Danny Garcia. A rematch with him, Erislandy Lara, even at 41 years old, would be all wrong for today's Errol Spence Jr., who's been removed from the sport for over a year now. You don't just jump off the couch to fight Lara.
I don't know what he's gonna do.
What the PBC have planned for him. If you guys know me, you know I don't like finesse fighters. Pure boxers are not my cup of tea. But Lara has proven himself a stubborn customer who's not going to let go of that belt without a fight.
Doesn't seem to have any plans of retiring.
As much as I'm not a fan of Lara's defensive style, his methodology, it's allowed him a longevity that a lot of other boxers don't have, won't experience.
41 years old, he's the oldest active reigning champion in the sport right now.
And so long as he is champion, I don't think he's going to call it quits. I don't think he's going to retire on a high as a champion. He's going to try to parlay that belt into a payday of some kind, whether it's on his side of the street or someone else's, if push comes to shove. That's the value of being a champion. You can always get one last payday
with that belt.
It's not quite clear what's next for Lara in the coming year. Men's super middleweight news. Eddie Hearn has said that he would like to stage Edgar Berlanga's next fight around February in Puerto Rico. Berlanga has never boxed in Puerto Rico as a pro. Come back, have a good fight at 168, and then all of those names are available. Munguia, Plant, Pacheco, Charlo.
Charlo? Jermall Charlo?
Edgar Berlanga's fight night weight for the Canelo Alvarez fight was reportedly 193 pounds, meaning he gained about 25.4 pounds after scaling to 167 at Friday's weigh-in. Now, I'm not the kind of guy that gets hung up on rehydration weights like some others do, quite conveniently, because in case you're not aware, this is the industry standard. Edgar's not the only one doing this. Edgar's not doing anything that David Benavidez wasn't doing, that David Morrell wasn't doing, or Ryan Garcia, or Devin Haney.
I think you have to be a little bit delayed. I think you have to be a little bit stupid to complain about this when this is literally the industry standard. You can't pigeonhole any one fighter for this practice.
Most guys in the sport of boxing are doing this. Most of them. So pigeonholing any one fighter, any one guy for this practice.
Are you stupid?
And it's not the advantage that so many make it out to be. That if you're one of these guys that's cutting a lot of weight to campaign in a particular division because you hope to use a size advantage over your opponents, well, it's not the advantage it's made out to be, and it's more of a ticking time bomb. Because the more weight you have to cut to get down there, and the more you rehydrate to the night of, the more difficult making that weight will become over time.
The greater toll it will start to take on your body, your punch resistance, your performances,
your power. You may lose your punching power over time if you continually do this, to campaign at a given weight for a perceived size advantage. And with so many fighters doing this, you can't pigeonhole any one guy for it.
Unless you're stupid.
So Eddie Hearn mentioned a couple of potentials for Edgar Berlanga now that he's suffered his first professional loss, seeming a moral victory that he might have lost in lopsided fashion. He did, but he was at least able to go the distance with Canelo, where a champion in Caleb Plant could not.
Was that 2 or 3 years ago?
Caleb Plant spoke on Edgar Berlanga and names like Charlo and Canelo as potential fights, saying it was a good fight. Didn't really feel like Berlanga, not going to be hating, but didn't really win a round. He was on the defensive a lot, but yeah, me and Canelo, me and Berlanga, me and Charlo, I think those are three big fights that the boxing world will love, and three big fights that I'd love to be in as well.
You're not getting a rematch with Canelo. He knocked you out. There's no precedent, no point in a rematch with Canelo.
So you can rule that one out right away. He mentioned Jermall Charlo, like Eddie Hearn mentioned Jermall Charlo. And I don't know why people keep bringing this guy up when he is so obviously finished, washed up. When's the last time Jermall Charlo impressed anybody with a performance?
When?
The last time we saw him was against Jose Benavidez, a guy who used to campaign as a welterweight. He fought him up there at super middle, and he looked flat, didn't really hurt the guy, didn't knock him out.
Call a spade a spade. If you bring up Jermall Charlo, it's because you're looking to pick a cherry. That's what he is. He is low-hanging fruit. And I understand that he's still an unbeaten fighter.
That doesn't mean that he's not washed up. He's got some kind of issues he's sorting through. Is it a substance abuse problem? Alcoholism, maybe? Narcotics? I don't know. But he's been in a downward spiral for at least the last 1-2 years, to where why would anybody want to fight him?
For what?
Why? It's not a big fight. This is a fighter who might be an unbeaten fighter, but his career has no traction, and no one is checking for him. He's got legal woes due to a car accident that he had back in May. He's facing charges.
Why is Caleb still talking about this guy?
Perhaps it's because one of the few fights that he could have that wouldn't require him to go anywhere or to deal with anyone else's fighters, because Jermall still is a PBC guy, and so is Caleb. A fight between them would be an in-house fight, but it wouldn't be a big fight. It's not a big money fight.
It's not. A Berlanga fight is a bigger fight than that.
Feel like you've got some unfinished business with Jermall. Well, you've got unfinished business with Edgar too, but that fight is actually worth something. Jermall isn't worth anything. Berlanga versus Plant. Berlanga versus Caleb Plant. That's the fight. That's the one he should focus on. That's the one he needs to shoot for. So both Edgar Berlanga and Caleb Plant share Canelo Alvarez as a common opponent. And where Canelo was able to stop Caleb, he couldn't stop Edgar.
A moral victory.
So maybe Edgar Berlanga stands a better chance against Caleb Plant than we originally thought, because he at least was durable enough to go the distance with Canelo where Caleb could not. Even if you perceive Caleb as being a better technician than Edgar, Edgar might be a better physical specimen.
More durable and a harder puncher. In a lot of Caleb Plant fights, you notice that he sort of slows down. He sort of gasses out after the midway point. And if that happens with Edgar, there's a chance Edgar could get through with something hard.
There is a chance, though it's not one way. When Caleb Plant fought Canelo Alvarez, he at least won a couple of rounds. He did, whereas Edgar, I didn't see a round that I could give Edgar yesterday. I didn't see where Edgar won a single round in this weekend's fight.
So what does that mean?
Edgar Berlanga's been in there with Jason Quigley. He's been in there with Steve Rolls. He didn't stop those guys. He didn't knock them out. Oh, I think Edgar has enough power that if he would have landed flush, he could have knocked them out. But power by itself means nothing if you can't land. So even if Edgar is a stronger puncher than Caleb, he's got to get that power off. He's got to deliver it.
If he can't, he could lose a points decision.
For me and my money, Caleb Plant needs to leave the island. He needs to leave the PBC. If he wants to fight on a regular schedule with some assurances that he's building towards something, he should honestly go to Matchroom, because Diego Pacheco is at Matchroom, because Edgar Berlanga is at Matchroom. These are great fights for Caleb moving forward. Caleb, who has no intention of leaving super middleweight to move up to light heavy. If you're staying put and you're staying there, they have more options for you than what the PBC has. All the PBC has is Jermall Charlo.
Nobody cares about that guy.
What do you actually get for fighting him?